we had more than 80% saying their companies are investing more in personalisation over the next 3 years. But as was mentioned before, I think Cressida said it, and actually we quote founder of Last Minute, Brent, who speaking only earlier this year on a major stage in another travel conference, said he doesn't think personalisation has come to travel at all. And actually,
wait, there's another travel conference?
There is.
Yeah.
It's a minor, small one. It takes place every year. But he was saying that 20 years ago, he had plans and thoughts and dreams of what we do last minute. And they're not really different to what people are saying they're going to do today. And so he believes not a lot has changed in that 2 decades. That might be an unfair appraisal of where things have gone. What do you see? What do you think he's wrong about that? There has been progress made, but there's certainly maybe a lot of runway to go.
Yeah. So I don't think he's wrong about that. I think for quite some time people have been talking about the promise of personalization. What that means is sort of up for debate, but I think in general, the way I think of personalization is it's understanding quite deeply your user, your buyer, your consumer, and tailoring experiences, tailoring the points of interaction that they have with your brand according to that knowledge of the user. Now, certainly progress has been made over the last 10 years, so I wouldn't discount that. But I think, in our industry in particular, in travel, many companies conceive of personalization very, very narrowly. And I think that's a mistake because the capabilities and the technology that are available to travel brands have really sort of expanded quite exponentially, and we can talk a bit more about that. But I think, many companies use historical data. So they look backwards at what user behavior was, what did certain groups of users do in the past, and how can that tell me about what I should do in the future? And that leads to sort of rules-based personalization, which really is sort of not where the cutting edge of data science or technology is. And there are much, much more powerful ways that you can deploy data to personalize experiences. And I think, over time, the message will get out. What is certainly true is that the largest companies in our vertical, right, the big, giant consumer-facing companies in our vertical, they've got the message. They're investing in the infrastructure, in the people to be able to do this well. And I think the question is, how is everyone else going to survive? And it's an extremely important question.
When we've asked our readers about personalisation, and it's a term that maybe many more definitions of that, do you think people really do understand what it actually means? Because that's obviously the starting point.
Yeah.
What they're doing. You seem to suggest not, if you're thinking they're not really looking into that future behaviour.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a vague term, so understandably, but when you look at the responses in the survey about what many travel companies are doing, what they call personalization is things like demographics, right? So if I understand the demographics of my user base, I can do something differently, right? And so that might mean if you're searching for 4 people, it's probably a family, so the hero image on your landing page is going to include some kids. Or this is, I think the number 2 category was what kind of device they're using. Is this desktop or is this mobile? That is not personalization, right? That is just a fundamental delivery of a UX appropriate to the device. So I think if that's the kind of personalization that people are thinking of, it's probably going to fall short of where the cutting edge is and of what is possible. And so getting very specific, I mean, down to individual users and down to predicted behavior of individual users, meaning what is this particular person going to do next? What is their goal at this exact moment? That is all possible. We can talk a bit more about that. But that's the level at which the technology permits and I think the most powerful brands are operating today.
So when you say looking forward and predictive, does that mean that potentially everybody gets a very different experience, unique experience? Is it possible to do that at the kind of scale that you work with companies on?
Yeah, so technically it is 100% possible. So if you have 10 million visitors coming to your brand, to your digital property each month, you could have 10 million different experiences. Right now, I think the management capacity to deal with that isn't there. So I think one of the key messages at Intent when we work with our partners is about de-averaging. So you may not get to 10 million different experiences, but if you can get to more than one, you will be doing something much, much better than you are today. And so what we mean by that is if you can predict what a user needs, if you can predict where they are in their shopping journey, in their booking journey, in their traveling journey, and then de-average your users. So instead of treating every individual as one single lump, if you can divide those into more refined buckets of users and then tailor the experience appropriately, you'll be well ahead of the game.
So we asked about what people felt are the threats to their businesses, if they were failed to grasp what they were talking about. We had quite a big response. They thought their competitors would take market share. But a lot also cited what was mentioned before by Duncan on the previous panel, the Google, the Facebooks and the Amazons, who are able to invest billions into this kind of thing every year. And everyone fears their impact. You spoke about this quite a lot. You called the data gobbleists. I think that's your word. Is it your word?
Yes, we actually coined that.
Have you trademarked it?
Yes.
Explain what you mean by that, and what do you see as being the potential there? Because in some ways these people are also partners, and they are potentially useful to.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's the unique thing about our industry, which is our fiercest competitors, the people we spend all day trying to kill, are often also in some other part of our organization our partners, and we exchange goods and services with them. We share expertise and partner with them. But what we mean by the datagopoly is these large companies that you're very familiar with, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple. And we are at a moment in sort of the history of the economy where data has a unique power. Data, it's been said many times, data is the new petrol, it's the new oil. It is the thing that is a key asset for almost any business. And I think we all know the ways in which Google, for example, threatens travel transaction businesses, right? They are moving from being just a search engine to being a commerce engine. They're moving farther and farther down the transaction funnel, and that is threatening for very many people in business. But what I think not everyone realizes is that really what these players, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, what they are able to do better than anyone else is aggregate and deploy data. And the way they do that is because, for the most part, they are always on applications or always on devices. We all have a phone. It knows who we are deterministically. It knows where we are. It knows what we're thinking about because that's what we type into our phone or speak into our phone. And that amalgamation of data means that they know their customers more intimately than any of us ever will. If we are a travel transaction site, we will see our customers a few times a year. People travel 2 to 4 times a year. That's when we'll get really deep insight about our users. But Apple, they're getting deep insight about their users 100 times a day. So is Google. And what they're doing with that data is increasingly creating a sort of identity platform where they know their users, who are also our users, and they're creating gates, right? So that if you're a brand trying to interact with a user, you are in one way or another going to have to go through these datagopolists. You're going to have to go through Google or Apple or Facebook. And we can talk about the implications of that, but it means that when that happens, they become the gatekeepers and the toll takers between brands and their users. And that is not a good long-term situation.
It was said earlier on, sort of Netflix doing this to recommend films. It seems like a relatively easy thing to do. and maybe in travel, the reason travel's not fast this is the complexity and difficulty of doing travel.
Yeah.
Do you accept that? Do you think maybe travel will always be quite complex, and will always be for grabs, so the big guys will always struggle to a degree to affect this?
I do not accept that. Data, so certainly travel is complex. It is an ecosystem unlike many other ecosystems. And there are so many different players with different sort of niches in the market. But the tools of machine learning, and that's what we do, we're a machine learning platform, so we predict user intent and value and behavior in real time for hundreds of the largest travel brands out there. What we have seen and shown and demonstrated is that there is absolutely enough data to generate the kinds of predictions and personalized experiences in the travel industry as required. And it's a somewhat difficult concept to understand, which is how do I actually take the data that I have if I'm in the travel transaction business, if I'm running a hotel site or I'm an OTA or an airline, if you don't have the capabilities in-house, meaning the infrastructure, the data science expertise, partner with someone, whether it's us or someone else, but those insights are available. You can do that on your own. And I would argue that you have to do that on your own, because if you don't harness your own data assets, if you can't personalize your experiences, well then the only people who will be Google, Apple, Facebook.
Yeah. We asked why maybe companies are struggling with this, what's the roadblocks, what the challenges, and regulations, technology, and investment sort of came out largely as the ones they cited. So how do companies do this? How do they get over those potential challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing can be either developing the right infrastructure. So I think data access, so having enough data to do this was one of the responses. And if you're above a few 100,000 visitors to your digital property a month, I can tell you definitively, you have enough data. And so that is a key asset. The question is, how do you harness it and deploy it? And I think one of the big ways is using it to predict what users are actually trying to accomplish, and doing that in real time. That's incredibly important.
So, this is all very good, but clearly companies they're not charities, they're doing this for a reason, and also
right.
to make more money,
sure.
And for improvements to the bottom line. So, explain how you see this approach affecting companies' bottom line. You've got some graphs that might illustrate this.
Yes, so there's a graph up here. So one of the easiest ways to explain what we do and what is possible is what we call a value curve. And you can see along the bottom the x-axis, that is sort of the percentage of your traffic. So think about 100% of your traffic running along the x-axis, and then the observed conversion rate going up the y-axis. And so ranging from 0%, some people don't convert, to upwards of 25%. And as I mentioned earlier, most companies think of their business, if you're in the transaction business, they think of their user base in an average way. So we focus on de-averaging users, right? But if you are trying to predict user value, trying to predict how likely a user or a population of your user base is likely to convert, and your model had no power. So if you actually weren't able to predict it, you would end up with a graph that looks like this, right? A flat line conversion rate. What's the conversion rate in your business? It's 5%. And that's because you aren't predicting accurately. And when someone asks you what your conversion rate is, the answer shouldn't be 5%. It should be, it depends on who you're talking about, right? There are different populations that exist inside of my user base. And so what we do is we tease out, we de-average those different populations, and we can do this for you. And so if you take a de-averaged approach, if we move on to the next slide. This is the same user base, the same 100% of users. But now we've taken, think about it by decile, so for each group of 10% of traffic, what actually is the predicted conversion rate and then the observed conversion rate, and then sort those users. And now all of a sudden that average flat line 5% is it's a very, very different story. So on the far left, you see there are populations of your users who have an extremely low conversion rate, right? Sub 1%. On the far right, there's another population of users who have upwards of 20% conversion rate. Now, it's probably not surprising that transaction environments behave this way. Everyone knows there's an 80-20 rule. But you can know this in advance. So you can know which users are which. And after each action that a user takes inside a digital environment, 20 milliseconds later, before the page loads, you can know how likely a user is to convert, and you can adjust that experience in real time before they actually see the UX that you want to deliver. And then, even just in the simplest possible way. So I mentioned earlier, if you're just treating your traffic as any more than one group, if you de-average them at all, you can start to deliver much better experiences. So on that far left, if you know that people have a conversion rate that's below 1%, is there anything you would want to do differently about the user experience than they have versus those on the far right who are very focused on conversion, right? Who have a 25% plus conversion rate? Would you want to do anything differently for that group? Well, of course you would, right? For those high converting users, you would probably want to streamline the experience, get out of the way, let them buy. For those on the low end, who maybe you paid to bring them into your environment and they're not going to buy, you may want to think about an experience that helps them get where they're going next, because they're not going to buy it.
So we talk about experiences. Matt was trying to explain what kind of experiences we were talking about here. I mean, there's some digital experiences. There are digital native companies that just transact online. But many of the companies in the room today will transact different ways. There are call centers and contact centers. So when you say experiences, this is what you're talking about. Decide where to take that customer in that particular journey. So it could be taken into an offline environment if they look like they're ready to do that.
Absolutely. So we work, a number of our partners go sort of online to offline, right? So there'll be a lot of research done online, but then ultimately, especially if it's a holiday package or a cruise, a more complex travel product, the sale is actually happening in a call center. The call centers are, on average, very high conversion rate environments. But again, they see curves like this. And so one of the ways we help our partners keep costs efficient in the call center is, well, if you understand in advance who's likely to buy and who isn't, you may want to differentiate what the hold time is or the experience of the agent that they go to, right? Are they going to your outsourced desk that's offshore and very low cost? Well, that might be an okay solution for someone unlikely to buy. But for someone who's very likely to buy, you might want to get them to your onshore platinum agent with 0 hold time. So that is among the experiences that we can help the average for our partners.
You obviously know the US market very well. You've worked and traveled in the US. You now know the UK and European markets well as well, because you've been here 6-7 years now, I think. Do you see the key difference in that maybe the US is slightly more digital focused, and over here there's still that kind of tendency to try to get people into a face-to-face or at least a human-to-human interaction at some point in the journey?
Yeah, I mean there certainly is a difference in profile among some segments of users, and in the US there was never sort of a national holiday brand. Packages were not sort of the default mode of the traveler. There was no sort of national high street travel agency, but I think in most markets in Western Europe, that was the case. There were high street brands where you could get a sort of personal interaction for a complex product. And that has persisted. Obviously, I think it's in decline based on the data that we saw earlier, but it's still an important part of the market. And so using your data and your digital assets to optimize that channel is important as well.
Another question we asked was where respondents thought were the areas you should prioritise for personalisation. And you came up with a number of areas, including the booking process, marketing, etc. You gave a number of options. And I know you feel that maybe there are areas that are slightly overlooked, but maybe there are sort of better gains or more short-term gains to be had. Explain where you think the priorities should lie.
Sure. There's for us, there's a few different areas where having this sort of predictive insight should impact business behavior. So again, if you think about these charts, for someone who's on the far left, right? So someone who's very likely to bounce, they have a sub 1% conversion rate. If you have brought them to your digital property through a paid channel, that segment of your user base is likely negative value to you, right? You may have paid a search engine $2 for a click to bring them into your digital transaction environment, and they're not going to buy, they're going to bounce. So what do you do with that information, right? Well, if you think about it, what's the best experience for that person? They've either ended up in the wrong place, or they are very early in the shopping funnel, and you're not the right brand for them. Well, you should help them get where they're going next, right? And that might be something controversial like an advertising-focused experience versus a transaction-focused experience. So help them get where they're going next, even if that's to your competitor, because otherwise you're going to go back to Google where they came from, and Google will make the next dollar. So that might be, that's an opportunity. By the same token, if you have a significant portion of your budget in remarketing, right? So once a user has visited one of your properties, you're spending to bring them back. Again, if you understand the average expected value of your users, you can be much more intelligent with your bidding strategy. So when you see your users again in search or on Facebook, you should be de-averaging your marketing spend as well. You should be de-averaging the bids that you're willing to spend on these users. So for someone on the far end with a very high expected conversion rate, you should be willing to bid quite aggressively. For someone on the low end, you may want to stop remarketing to them or lower your bid tolerance very dramatically.
Okay, we're heading toward the end of the session. We're very keen to take questions on this one from the floor, so please put your hands up and indicate if I can see you. I'll get a microphone to you, hopefully it's a spare one. There's a question there, so if we can get a microphone there, but while that's happening, I'll just ask Richard one last question from me. What do you see coming next? I mean, 20 years and nothing's happened, according to Brent, but actually you disagree. But where are we going next? I mean, how far this can go? What's the next wave of personalisation that you see coming down the line?
Yeah, so I think everything is moving to real time. So, as I mentioned, 15 milliseconds, 20 milliseconds after a user takes any action, you should be able to respond to that new intent that's been articulated. So moving to real time, I think the entire digital economy is moving from pull to push. So anticipating user needs and getting the right things in front of them. And then I think ecosystem personalization is going to be something big as well, which is it's not just about your brand, but it's working with an ecosystem of brands to make sure that the whole market doesn't cave in to Google and Facebook.
So what's finding brands that are affiliated with you in some way, have similar customers, and even if they're not in travel, maybe that?
Yeah, that could be, but even being willing to work with complement. So airlines should be working more closely with hotels to understand the user. And even competitors should be working more closely with each other so that rather than letting all the margin be sucked out by search engines, they can actually maintain their own position.
Similar to what Duncan was saying earlier on from DXC.
Right.
I'm going to go and bring this back, or you can shout.
I didn't quite understand where you get the data from within your customer organisations in order to create your magic. I mean, there must be also, you talked about historical data, but you're also looking at what are those data sets basically for you to make these decisions in sub 20 millisecond moments.
So this is all real-time first-party data. So we're not in the business of buying or selling data or sharing one company's data with anyone else. What we do is we integrate as a first party with our partners. So if you're an OTA or a hotel company or airline, we integrate into your digital properties. And then we are using the data that you already gathered, right? So if you think about it, users hand their intent data over to you in exchange for value that you deliver in the form of a good user experience. And we work with that data that you are already gathering. Now, you may not be aware of how much data you have, you may not be gathering it effectively. We do that for you in real time. And our platform builds these predictive machine learning models
there are, I mean, a number of third-party data firms out there that de-aggregate and depersonalise it, so you don't know who's doing what. I would guess. So
Sure.
maybe like Spadara or Sojourn.
Yeah.
Are they useful as well to give a kind of a mass view of things, or is it, can you do it with your own data?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you have more than about 200,000 or 300,000 visitors per month across your digital properties, you have enough data to do this on your own. I do think the sort of data broker, data seller model is going to be increasingly under threat because, number one, cookies are under threat, and number two, there's regulatory threat to those models. So our message is really, you have data. It is the most important asset that you have, and you need to leverage it if you're going to win in the market and protect yourself from data blacklists.
Great, thank you for the question. There's a question in the middle rows over here. Please, thank you. Again, just say who you are, where you're from.
Yeah, Ryan from Haynes Smartphones. Because it is a machine learning, how long will it take to actually understand the data that you're using there to be able to give real viable results for each part of the journey, understanding that I'm assuming that the customer has to come into interaction with your data platform on a continuous basis for you to get more refined results. So what is the sort of like timeline that a company will be looking at for it to be effective?
Yeah, it's actually quite fast. So to build a curve, you know, one of those value curves where we de-average your traffic and we're predicting a bunch of things, but most importantly, I think the conversion rate. Again, if you have above about 200,000 to 300,000 visits per month, it takes about 3 weeks to train a model. It's all automated. And from that point, and then we'll share those results with you, but from that point, we're able to make predictions from the very first interaction. Obviously, the more interactions a specific user has with your brand, the more powerful and accurate the predictions get. But once we have a model like that in place, again, 2 to 3 weeks into our relationship, we can predict on first visit the likelihood to check back.
Maybe shed a bit more light on that. As I said, you've been in this market for 6 years, so you picked up some good clients in the UK. One of those is IceLolly, so
That's right.
the sort of holiday price comparison site. You know, you can maybe explain what you've been doing with them and how they've used intent and what's been the results of the work we've done.
Sure, yeah, we've been working with IceLolly since I think 2015. And they use our enterprise prediction service, the sort of predictive intelligence platform that builds these sort of curves I was showing you. And we do a number of things with them. So at the very early stage, if someone is visiting their site and we predict that they're going to bounce and have a very low conversion rate, especially if this is, as I was mentioning earlier, if someone in that user set has come from a paid channel and we predict that they're going to bounce, we're going to leave without a single interaction beyond the page on which they land. Before they leave, we have what we call a comparison experience where they can compare other vendors for the kind of search that they're doing now. So it's a way to monetize negative value users. They also use our predictions in retargeting. We have a product called Intent Target, which lets you activate those predictions in your SEM buying and in your Facebook buying. So once you predict the value of a user, you want to activate that to make sure you're bidding correctly as you spend inside of Google. And IceLolly is a great example of deploying that effectively.
Okay, great. Well, I think we'll draw that to a close. So please join me in thanking Richard Harris, founder and CEO